Hey, everybody, and welcome to a live stream of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, the only podcast dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hey, hey.
This is where we answer those cycling and triathlon-related questions that you've submitted at TrainerRoad.com/podcast. For those that don't know, we also stream this live, usually every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, and we stream it live on Facebook and YouTube. But today, we're doing it on Wednesday because it's a holiday here in the United States tomorrow.
Next week's Wednesday, too.
Next week is Wednesday as well because one of you is leaving.
I'm leaving.
That's right. Yeah, you're leaving slightly early. So we'll be back next week on Wednesday, but you can join us live. You can ask questions, and then after we record the typical podcast, we jump in and answer some of those questions that you submitted live, kind of off the cuff and informal. We'd love for you to join us on the live streams, and you can find them also on forum.trainerroad.com, where you can go on. You can find a whole bunch of other stuff too. It's obviously not just the live stream, but the cool part is we don't have producer Ian with us today. We have producer Nick, but the cool part being Nick will be adding in different things that we speak about the whole way as we go through.
Nick literally waved.
Yeah.
No one online or on the podcast can see it. He waved.
Yep. So we're glad to have producer Nick with us. And if you want to see anything that we talk about throughout this episode, you can go on to the forum.trainerroad.com and look for episode 186, and you'll be able to find it there. On that forum, there's been a bunch of different stuff that's been posted. Constantly. Like when I post something, I kind of get like this moment of pride. I'm like, it's going to sit at the top for a bit. And then like I refresh 30 seconds later and somebody's already posting something else. So ton of interaction. But I wanted to talk about two different posts. First one you posted up, Nate. Kind of a cry for help.
Yes, so I got sick again. And then actually based on the calendar, I've been doing like yellow lines for annotations for when I was sick. And I scrolled up and I'm like, holy smokes, I get sick a lot. And I had been writing down all my sickness in like a little notepad that I've taken. So I looked at it, and over 14 months, I did 9 rounds of antibiotics, all for sinus infection. Some of them were like 2 courses in a row. But I've talked about before, I've got immune system problems, low IgG3. There's a whole bunch of ideas in there. Some doctors, too, have messaged me directly with a whole bunch of other things that are kind of outside the scope of what people have put in there.
Thanks to them.
Yep. So thank you so much for that. And basically what I need to do is I'm doing another round with my doctors locally. Get another immune test on Monday. And then I have access to this network, and I probably will go, if we don't find something locally, I might go out of UCSF or Mayo Clinic in Arizona and try to figure out how to fix this.
So you've done, and you can go into this forum post and see if you're the type of person that struggles with regular sinus infections or colds and you wonder why you can't beat them. Perhaps this can be a spot where you can either chime in on things that you've done or you can pick up things that maybe you've missed because you share. Geez,
I've tried everything.
The podcast would be like an hour long if we just listed off the things that you've done.
Yeah, I've tried everything.
It's a lot.
And you'll see there, so I pride myself as a man of science and evidence, but lately I've been, like, you'll see this list of supplements. I just went online and, like, Googled immune system boosters and just bought everything I could. Yeah. And that's only been the last 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. So that hasn't really been probably long enough to take effect, but also long enough to really do damage if it's like that. I probably have very expensive pee. That's kind of the joke. But I still want to take Western science. I guess that's the way. I don't know. But evidence-based science, go get some blood tests, figure that kind of stuff out. There's a lot of interesting stuff we talked about last time. Chad, you weren't here about butt biome stuff. I know there's a whole bunch of posts.
Biome.
I said it.
Yeah. You don't want to flip that one. Yeah.
I said it wrong. I did that yesterday too when we talked about this.
More or less, yeah.
I understand that these antibiotic stuff will hurt my gut biome, which can influence your immune system and other stuff.
Right.
Maybe even athletic performance. They're researching that. So I am trying to improve that separately. And I don't know if that's the root cause or a symptom, but I'm aware of that. There's probably 45 posts mentioning that same thing. So
there's a whole lot.
So anyways, I really appreciate it. And if anyone else here knows about stuff,
yes.
There was like I forget what it's called, but it's a treatment where you like weekly you get like an immune boost. Like yeah, and it was gonna be like $30,000 a year or something. But then someone else said you could get it, and they think you could get it for like $6,500 a year, which makes it a lot more palatable.
Yeah.
But they kind of had a similar situation to me, and that fixed it. It doesn't really, I don't know if that fixed the root of the problem, but if you have a disease where you just can't have your immune system isn't strong enough, that's just what you have to do. So I'll take any advice at all.
It's interesting how, like, because you're pursuing fitness on a bike and everything else, I think that it brings us into like a tighter focus, because I bet a lot of people struggle with things like this, but perhaps because they don't have the performance aspect, the physical performance aspect, or worked into their lives, they probably don't recognize it as much of a problem. But it's like, we talk a lot about cycling for fitness, and we also talk about general health and how you really do have to balance the two, and they can kind of get out of the way. But this is a good example how perhaps both of them can work together for general health. You know?
I probably miss 2 to 3 months a year being sick. You guys know, you guys seen it right over the years.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not like it's been acute. It's been since the beginning.
It's how things are.
Yeah.
Yeah. For you. Yeah. It's rough.
So anyways, please help.
Another one that, so I posted this up this week, and this was per request of a lot of folks. I've struggled with knee injuries for maybe the last 3 years or so, just overuse injuries. Call it IT band syndrome, call it chondromalacia, call it patellar tracking problems. I don't know, call it whatever you want, tight hips, anything. I've been diagnosed with all of that, and I've tried to address a lot of that. So I went through and I actually I referred back to a bunch of notes that I have on everything, and I basically made a whole list of things that I've tried. I made a list of things that I felt like out of that list that were actually effective, and little notes about those. Nice. And then right now I've been using a whole routine from Dr. Jay Deshari in Bend, Oregon at Rebound Physical Therapy. And he's worked with like a ton. Like you go into his office and it's like, there's like cyclocross national champs jerseys just like lining the wall. Like it's posters on a kid's wall. It's just like everywhere, right? And runners and all this stuff. So he knows what he's doing. He's worked with a lot of cyclists, and Jay himself is a cyclist. So he prescribed this routine to me, and I found it extremely helpful. And really what it works on is a lot of glute activation in ways that aren't just the traditional clamshells or anything else. They're much more effective at really isolating the glutes, but incorporating some sort of stability into the movement. You can also, take plenty of latitude with something like this. But anyways, I posted that up as a resource, and hopefully to kind of make like a repository or a place where people can go where they can share if they're having knee problems, and then they can share maybe what's working for them. So basically, because whenever you try to search knee problems for cyclists, it's just like searching like natural remedies for colds, or something like that. Like you can just get so deep into a rabbit hole where you actually don't learn much. So I hope that post can be helpful to some people. It's what I have been prescribed, and I do feel that knee injuries are extremely individual.
Yeah.
So it's not like this is what you should do. But if more people jump in there and post what they're doing, I think that it will be a helpful resource.
I think what happens with knee injuries too, sometimes is what's what happens with my stuff too. I've gone to lots of medical professionals, and they're just like, yep, that's just how it is. And with the knee stuff, so when you have more possibilities, like people are here like, oh, what did you think of this? I'm like, yes, I'll talk to my doctor about this. It's not like we're having this medical, like you're my doctor on the form or doing this. It's like,
Great
that's a
point.
good thing to bring up to my doctor.
Yes.
So this is like, you could say, oh, what about these exercises? Maybe I'll bring up to my PT, or find another PT that might like these exercises and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, if your PT isn't open to discussing different options like that anyway,
find a new PT.
Yeah,
because your PT should be trying to find the best way to health for you, and if it's not working, then
it's not about the PT, it's about you.
Exactly.
One doctor emailed me directly, and the amount of questions he asked, I'm like, I've gone to 3 doctors. They haven't asked me any of these questions.
I want to go to you.
I know. He's on the East Coast. It'd be great, but it just shows that everyone's not created equal.
Yeah, lots of people are moving to Reno. He could just move to Reno too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
He'd be my private doctor.
Plenty of business. So, but anyways, you can go on there and you can find a bunch of other topics too on the forum that other people are posting, whether it's things that are, they're using that are helping them with devices. People talk all the time about different race strategy stuff. It's super fun to kind of, play the what if game and strategize with that sort of stuff. And then we're also releasing a ton of new stuff all the time with TrainerRoad.com. Obviously, that's what we're all about. You can see it behind us if you're watching on the live stream. And just recently, so over the weekend, and this is going to lead into, this is a transition into the next topic, which you're going to love, Nate. But this weekend, I had Keegan Swenson, who he's one of the fastest, if not the fastest, cross-country mountain biker in the United States. Extremely fast. He's won I think the majority of the Epic Rides races that he raced, he won this year. I don't know if that's entirely true, but he's extremely fast, very fit person. And he came to do a mini camp with me on the way over to Thanksgiving to visit his in-laws. So we had 3 days of training and riding together. And I got to show him what's new with TrainerRoad, because we've released a whole lot of stuff since he and I last actually spent some time in front of a computer together. I just it's cool to see things like all the different things that we've added and kind of like share the stoke that we have. And then it also helps you to realize what is significant and we take for granted. So a few things. Number one, on the calendar that we have, it was kind of fun actually to add and like just add plans on in the future and see what it would do to my training stress and just kind of play around with it and change it and play the what if game to see if I could really actually handle, high volume plans and outside rides. It would be like, regularly 800, 900 TSS weeks. I probably can't handle that, but it was fun to see, right? And it's cool to see how that affects your training stress and all that stuff. And so we were able to do that. Another thing that I wanted to do too was when you look at like annotations. So on these 3 days that I had, it wasn't, 2 of the days were very close to what I had for my training plan. A third day was not close to what I had for my training plan, but I still feel like it was beneficial for me since this is a rest week. So I made sure to throw in an annotation. So then when I look back, I don't wonder why I didn't stick to my plan. So my annotation for this weekend, it says Keegan Camp, right?
Yeah, that's key because you never know
helpful.
What you need to know until after you look back. You know what I mean? Like in the middle, you're like, of course I knew this happening this week. I mean, when you write it down, it seems silly. And then you look back 6 months later and you're like, oh, yeah.
Yep.
So that's really important.
It really is.
Write down your notes.
So like using the annotations is really helpful there. I also use the annotations for events that are on the calendar, but I'm not, in other words, like the racing calendar, but maybe not my racing calendar. So for example, I want to go do the Missoula, Montana Pro XCT this year. It's a race I've wanted to do for an extremely long time, but I just don't know. I don't think it'll work with scheduling. Yeah. But I still put the annotation in that the event is on that weekend.
Sure. Yeah.
So I actually went through and I've added in so many events that are on there just in annotations.
Yeah, just have them on the calendar.
That's like one spot.
That's what I do too. Like around this time, I go and list all the events that I can.
Yep.
And then you put them all down. I used to do it in Google Calendar, but you put them all down. You don't want to mark them all as races because then
totally,
like you're not going to do all of them.
Right.
But you need to know when they are.
Yes.
Every Tuesday night race we have. And then you start to look at it and you're like, wow, that's a lot of racing. And you got to cut it back, right, Chad?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you gotta be choosy for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not professional athletes, and even professional athletes have to be choosy.
Yep. And one of the helpful things now is when you do actually make it a race, instead of just a small annotation on there, it shows up. Well, it will show up as like a priority for people when it says A, B, and C. So
this guy is
leaking things, but it's super helpful because you can see your races laid out.
You guys both do that. I'm gonna turn off your early access.
It's awesome. It's really, really helpful.
No, there's actually a post in the forum that you can see what it looks like. So.
Yep. Yeah. Another thing, I wanted to see more time, so I was able to collapse the TSS chart view, the training stress chart above. I was able to collapse that so I could see more weeks. In other words, it's like a calendar that's actually made for cyclists rather than a calendar that you're using for cycling purposes. It's really nice. Now you can copy and just move workouts or entire weeks like so easily. You just like hit the 3 dots, copy it, and then you just click where you want it to go.
Yep.
So nice. And the last thing, you can also like if you've done a ride, for example, on my enduro bike, I don't have a power meter. So whenever I do those rides, it doesn't pop up with TSS. But TrainerRoad says, hey, do you want to estimate that TSS? And now it's super easy. I can do it from the calendar. You used to have to like hop into the ride and kind of drill in. Now I can just do it right there from the calendar.
We actually do listen to your feedback. We have a Slack channel that all gets sent in. We go through that every week. All the forum posts, answering those. Product managers prioritize it. Really like almost some of your ideas aren't good, but almost all the ideas are really, really good.
Just like some of our ideas aren't good.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah,
but just joking, everyone. You know who you are. But it's just priorities, right? Like you can only do so much stuff. So you can't we can't do it all at once. So the thing right now that we're working on that's exciting and hard to do, but pretty close is reoccurring workouts. Ooh. So to be able to schedule something and say, hey, every third Tuesday, this has once a month. This is, every so many days, you can have something scheduled.
Like that group ride that you always do.
Yeah, like Saturday drop rides.
Yep.
Reoccurring through the summer. Bam.
Yep. Yeah, it'd be super easy to do. So anyways, it was really cool to run Keegan through the calendar and to kind of see it from a fresh perspective and all the things that we've added. If you haven't checked it out, I genuinely recommend you do. It's pretty awesome. It's a whole lot more than just indoor training now. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Thanks, everyone. It's been a great podcast.
Check and done. With that, it's probably a good segue with Keegan and I. We did the first 2 days of our training camp on mountain bikes, and the third day he was like, I want to get out on the roadies and do a loop around here. I've heard it has good road riding, so we planned this route. And then I realized the route that we planned...
Wait, does this make anyone faster?
That's usually our litmus
Should we
test.
just bypass it?
Yeah. Yeah. I have total takeaways that can help people for sure. Yeah. So we had this loop planned out. Nate looks very impatient. You'll see why. Had this loop planned out, and then I realized, oh, wait, Nate has a KOM on this route. We checked. We verified. Yes.
I have 2 KOMs. I had 2 KOMs in this life because I don't go and hunt for KOMs. This is the only KOM I've ever hunted for.
It's a long one.
It's like 2 hours and it
Two
was
and a
2
half
hours
hours.
and 22 minutes or something.
Uh-huh.
And
What's it now?
Here's how you can make it faster. Strava's gotten poo-poo over people not doing proper training because
Yes.
they just go after KOMs.
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue there is a spot where, like for this one, I wanted to do sweet spot for about 2.5 hours. So I was like, oh, here's this KOM. If I stay steady for this whole time, it's kind of fun to do it at the same time.
With a bit of forethought, KOMs can be really useful in terms of training. It's when you get lured into it out on a ride that's supposed to be something else that everything derails.
For instance, VO2 max, let's say you got to do 3-minute VO2 intervals, and you found like 3 different climbs.
My
or 3
neighborhood
minutes.
is perfect for that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about your neighborhood.
Yeah.
That would be great, right? And it's really fun then to do that. So people, there's a little, but I saw it on the forum before we talked about this. There's like people are like, oh, you cannot go after KOMs while you're training.
Oh, sure you can.
You can, yeah. Just you make it.
Do it strategically.
Thank you, Chad.
Yep. And for me right now, I'm in my base phase. I'm working through like longer, steadier efforts.
Yeah.
Ones that are high end of tempo, getting into that range. That's what I'm looking at. And this is perfect for 2.5 hours of keeping steady pressure on the pedals. So not a typical KOM. Usually they're a whole lot shorter. But Nate, you had set the record, and you had set the record on this one
Solo.
Solo.
That is a point we're bringing up.
Did I have the best cross-country pro U.S. mountain biker with me? No. Did I have as good as weather conditions? No.
You set the time at 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 41 seconds. You had a 20.5 mile an hour average, which is actually really fast when you consider the fact that this one has almost 2,200 feet of climbing in it too. So it's a good amount of climbing that you have in this one. So you had that. We instantly, once we realized that our loop is going to overlap with your KOM, we got extremely excited. So we went through the whole process, and I'm going to go through what we did to plan to take on a route like this. So then Nate can just sit here uncomfortably.
I want to say this another thing too, though. Like he saw my forum post about me like reaching out. I'm sick all the time. I was in bed sick. I was not working. I couldn't train. And he posts, "Hey Nate, getting emails like you got some KOMs."
Kicks you while you're down.
Exactly. Like we know Nate can't do anything or react to this. So let's jab him a little bit.
Sorry, Nate. Not sorry.
Sorry.
Do you have Jeff DeBush's number?
Yeah, I do. Okay. Do you want
it? We could get it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a diesel. He's a strong dude. So, anyways, we planned the route, realized it was Nate's KOM. So then the first thing that we do absolutely is go to best bike split, right? So because at that point we want to figure out what the ideal pace is.
Went after this.
Oh, we went after this thing.
That's what it takes, Chad.
So, to beat Nate.
He also did it on the Venge that we bought him.
So you stole your own KOM in a way, right?
Yeah. It's just.
Okay. So
how could you?
Here's what we ended up doing. We looked at best bike split, and we basically just thought, what could we do to get like a 220? Because another thing, if you really want to rib somebody that has a KOM, you don't steal it by a huge margin. You just steal it enough so then they stay motivated to go back for it again, right?
No, I'm going to do like 2 hours flat next time.
There we go. So in this case, we looked at that around 2 hours and 20 minutes, what we would need to do to beat it. And it said that all I needed to do was average around 230 watts. So I figured that would actually be a good, like, high-tempo, sweet spot effort right now for me.
I think on that ride, my normalized power was
282.
Yeah, 282 for that to do it.
Yeah, so difference in weight.
And I was by myself.
So but with best bike split, it was just saying, solo, right, is what I needed to do. So
and I brake on the descents, and you guys don't.
Yeah, it's true. So the tricky part about this one is that it starts out with like a 2,000-foot climb almost, and it's Geiger. If you've used TrainerRoad, you know that there's a workout called Geiger. It doesn't replicate the climb, but
not so much.
Geiger grade is just like a consistent 5 to 6er, basically 5 to 6%. And we stayed really conservative on that. And Nate, you actually you were 5 minutes ahead of us, and you look on Strava, you were 5 minutes ahead of us at the top of that climb.
Yep.
Do you think that you pushed too hard on the climb, or do you think that you did it just right?
I don't know.
See, that was the question.
I think it was just right.
Because this is the question that a lot of people have.
So if I was doing a triathlon,
yeah.
for sure, I would have not pushed so hard on that was when my FTP was 345, and I would not have pushed 330 for 36 minutes.
Right.
Up a climb, absolutely not. I would have gone slower.
Yeah. So we just stayed, at a comfortable pace, like 250 watts, and we're about the same weight. He and I am a little heavier than he is. And then after that, we ended up just keeping consistent pressure on. But some interesting things. First of all, for nutrition, I didn't take in any caffeine or anything else like that, Nate. So I wasn't trying to really put it down. We kept the pace pretty consistent. It wasn't too tough. It was just like a constant effort. But we had 2 tall bottles. It was a 2.5 hour route, so we knew that we should drink at least 1 small bottle an hour for each of us. Even though it was cold, you still have to keep drinking, but we brought 2 tall bottles to make sure we did that. I ate 2.5 packages of Cliff Blocks over the 2.5 hours, and I also ate 4 untapped maple syrup packets. Those things are really good. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But no caffeine, and then we were far from aero too, Nate. So I'll explain what I'm getting at. I had a vest, arm warmers, a buff, knee warmers, shoe covers, winter gloves. We weighed Keegan's cross bike beforehand. It was over 20 pounds.
And some to draft off of.
Yeah.
So,
there's
that.
Even Steven, yeah.
But the point is, there's low-hanging fruit, and you can get it back, Nate. I think you could get it back solo. Because this one...
probably going to bury himself trying.
I think so.
I'm pretty sure this is...
I'm going to start round number 10 of antibiotics in about a week after I do this. I mean, I'm going to do it solo.
Yeah, I think you can get it solo. I really do. Because it was not a full-on capacitive effort. We did wick it up pretty hard at the end because we realized that we were close. Yeah,
I'm sure you did.
But
that's where you guys took time out of me on the descents and on the way back. And for everyone knows, Strava, wind can have a huge impact on it. And there's this valley that we come back in, and it's usually a headwind. Yeah. On some days, it'll be a wicked tailwind. Yeah. I've never experienced one of those days, but Pete Morris has a KOM in one of the sections, and for 10 miles or something, it's like a 38 mile per hour average because of that tailwind. Yeah. If I find one of those days, you guys are in trouble.
We're done.
But you guys had no wind that day.
Yeah, it was breathless.
I'm not sure what my wind was, but anyways. That was great. Sure, I learned a lot from that question.
The point is, I think that if you do have something like this that isn't going to derail your training, for you, it's motivating. It's a 2.5 hour effort, so you don't have to worry about throwing yourself completely off, too early on in your schedule or anything else like that.
Depends on the person. When I was new, 2.5 hours would destroy me.
Sure.
But now 2.5 hours of sweet spot stuff is take 2 days off, can come back.
And the fact is, 2.5 hours, you can't ride, all out for 2.5 hours. You'll end up dropping down. You have to pace yourself.
Yeah, you exactly.
Right. So it's not like you're going to be in VO2 territory for the whole time, right? So because of that, if it's early on in the season and that jives with your training, it can be a good opportunity.
This is great for. I'm doing the bike leg of Santa Rosa half with my wife, and that is about probably a 2.5 hour course. Even starts with a big climb.
Yeah, that'd be good.
This is perfect. So actually after this, I told Jonathan hey, these are all the new TT parts I need.
Yeah, we got his
and
bike
I'll just
super aero.
I just need to get it by myself.
Do you have anything to say to Keegan? I think he's watching right now too.
No, I mean. Good job. I'm a Cat 5 cyclist. You got my KOM. I think I'm one ride away to get my upgrade.
The last point that I was going to say is the best time to chase KOMs in my mind is
when someone's sick.
No. After you've reached peak fitness and your goals are kind of done for the year.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, that's a fun time.
That's the fun time. And Keegan was telling me about
that's
it.
That's when I used to do it.
So
that's exactly right. I love that.
What and talk about firepower. Keegan's house is a rotating mix of pro cyclists, either pro roadies when it's Tour of Utah time that stay there, or pro mountain bikers. So after World Champs, he just went out with them, and they just completely destroyed and they conquered their whole entire place in Park City and in that region. So that would be really fun to be as fast as them and to be able to do it. But I think that's something fun that can just you have this fitness, you did your A race, maybe your A race went really well, then you were probably riding on a wave of confidence. Maybe it didn't go well. Then you can at least have fun going for some other stuff with the fitness that you've built up.
We've talked about unstructured training in the off season. Yeah, that's great. It's fun.
Great time.
Motivating.
I would maybe Keegan wants to help me get it from you.
I think they should categorize KOMs. I mean, Cat 1 through 5. Because when a KOM is owned by someone like Phil Guyman of Mauna Kea, you're riding for not even second.
Right, exactly. At that point,
Strava premium feature, you put your license number in.
Yeah.
And it hooks up to it, and then it shows what category
perfect,
it is. And as you move up, it actually moves your time up.
Yeah.
That's pretty fun.
I like that.
That would be cool. Keegan might want to join you because he actually has the KOM, mind you, by 1 second.
I know, so he can't really do it.
He can give it back to you.
I know a lot of fast riders. I'm going to train 25 people. Just blow through all of that.
Just use them up.
So anyways, so sorry for stealing your KOM, but not sorry at the same time.
It's okay.
It was good fun. I got you some motivation.
If I get, I am not lacking for motivation like in anything in my life. I think you guys know that. So I just need to, if I'm not sick for like a whole year, you better watch out.
All right, there we go.
Whole month.
Whole month.
Shoot for that.
Thanks, Chad.
Months first. Let's go into Gemma's question. I hope that's how you say your name. I apologize if not. She says, you guys talk a lot about the importance of rest and recovery for becoming a better rider and overall increased health. Is there any point in the average woman getting involved in a training program when she has a baby to look after, he's 4 months old, and is not getting the normal amount of sleep? In my case, I'm getting up 1, 2 to 3 times a night to settle my baby, so only getting broken sleep and short 3-hour blocks mostly. And many times, the only chance I get to do a trainer ride or any type of exercise is while he's asleep during the day, if he'll go to sleep, even though I prefer to be sleeping too. Which is a good point. Everyone kept telling me when we had a newborn, everyone was like, yeah, when your son goes to sleep, that's when you train. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's also when I sleep because I don't sleep during the night. So, if people tell you that sort of advice, don't feel alone when you feel like you just want to sleep. It's good to rest. You need that. So she says, I'm new to your programs. I haven't seriously exercised in over a year, and I haven't ridden a bike even longer. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and learning more about the science behind it all. So, this is kind of like a point where when you're in these scenarios and you're trying to balance things, it's extremely stressful with a newborn. You don't get a lot of stress. This is where you're really talking about
sleep.
Yeah, or don't get a lot of sleep, but get plenty of stress.
It's funny when we review. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is where you're talking about overall health, and that's kind of the main goal.
What's funny, I'm going to pitch this to you, Chad, but when we were reviewing this question ahead of time, at the same time, I said absolutely not, and you said absolutely yes. But we're talking about two different things. I was thinking about performance training.
Yeah.
And you were thinking about exercise. And then when you said exercise, I was like, oh, absolutely exercise. But so there's kind of that mind shift between the two of I want to train for an event, or whether I need exercise. So
and that's where we concluded that in a situation like this, stop seeing it as training and just start seeing it as exercise in the pursuit of general good health. And I just wanted to list off some of the benefits to general good health because I think we lose sight of this too often. We're chasing, bigger FTPs, faster, Strava KOMs, faster 3-minute power, higher 3-minute power, et cetera. And we get a little distracted from the underlying benefits that benefit us in all facets of life. Mm-hmm. So just to remind people, because I think most people have heard this, a simple Google search, and you can find all these things just as well as I did. You reduce your risk of hypotension, so high blood pressure, improve an unfavorable cholesterol profile, reduce your risk of stroke and chronic heart disease, diabetes, and all the other metabolic disorders, some cancers, cognitive dysfunction. It has a bearing on weight management and bone health. This is especially crucial for women, but athletes in general. Stronger muscular system, stronger cardiorespiratory system, better opportunity for social interaction, which has a huge psychological component to it as well.
Yeah,
reduced.
Just can I add to that? That's extremely important. Your newborn does not give you good social interaction.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And when you're a mom, you have to be attached to that child, because the child needs you.
And if it's your first child, that whole lifestyle shift that comes with it.
Yeah. But particularly if you're the nurturing one that has to take care of the child, like I know with Simon, I could try to do as much as I could, but there were certain points where he just needed his mother, right? Yeah. So in those situations, if you find yourself where you're attached to that, another thing, don't feel bad. And I know this is perhaps stemming outside of cycling, but don't feel bad for wanting to just have some human interaction with somebody else. You need time away from
and that social interaction and just exercise in general reduces anxiety, and there's a lower prevalence of depression. So, just exercise for all of those reasons. Don't even worry about whether or not you get faster or you look fitter. These things will probably happen anyways, but don't go chasing those things. Just concern yourself with better overall general health.
Yeah. It's really kind of the goal. And I can't help but think about with this sort of thing, fitting in what you can and being okay with that and not committing yourself to too grand a plan. Right?
Yeah, which is why we landed on a short list of what we would recommend in a case, where your opportunity for exercise, that the time is limited. So things like the 35 to 40 or 30 to 45 minute workouts that we have are certainly a good option. Weight training is always a good option, and it doesn't have to be some knockdown drag out 60-minute workout every time, 40 minutes. It can be 15, 20, 30 minutes. Short runs and walks, and then just like we were talking about, group classes, and group classes of any type. I mean, the social interaction is just as important as the actual physical activity.
For me and my wife, with our kids, the number one thing is if you can find a gym with a daycare that takes kids of your age, ooh, that opens it up, because at home,
I can imagine.
it gets things get they like to interrupt.
Yep.
But at other places, you can like being able to just say, okay, they'll watch your kid for 45 minutes or an hour, and then you can go do a group class or weights and stairs or a little bit of running or walking. It's just, that is the best feeling. It's like reprieve, because you know too, like you're just a little page away from the intercom if anything goes wrong.
And something like kind of like a hack on this is, if you do feel like you need that interaction with other people, the group class thing can be really helpful. It may not even be like a natural thing for you. You haven't done it before, but like Sarah wasn't big on the group class things beforehand, but now that once we had kids, she was like, I get to combine exercise and socialization. It's awesome. So like being open to that. I remember when we had Simon, I was like, I'm going to try to get in 3 small workouts a day.
I remember that podcast.
Right?
And I laughed.
Yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work at all. But what
good on paper.
The
Look
principle,
good on paper.
Yeah, the principle that did work behind that, though, was number 1, short workouts. Number 2, being okay with splitting up a workload. Now, I ended up only getting in 1 to 2, right? And that was like all that I could muster in with all the different things. No, not a week. But it's really tough. But the main thing I learned through this whole process was being flexible and kind of like, I guess responsive is a good term for this. So like basically you go into a scenario where you're like, I have this plan, I want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, your toddler takes priority, or your baby takes priority in this case.
Yeah.
So you just simply have to be okay with change.
And that flexibility relates to the responsibilities of caring for your child, but also, what happened to your sleep that prior night. And so maybe you have a workout planned, if you're going as far as planning out your next day's workouts, and you get horrible sleep that night, and it's a pretty demanding workout. Well, maybe, and this is where the responsive aspect of it comes into play. Be responsive to your situation. Don't simply follow a training plan, or no matter how loose that plan is or how rigid it is, don't simply follow it because it's on the docket. If you need to shift things around, if you need to modify things because of, in your case, poor sleep the night before, then do it.
And I don't know what your situation is like, Gemma, in terms of your partner and their availability and everything else like that. But one thing is I have to remind my wife to be like, hey, like I need him, so then you can go. You know what I mean? So it may be different for your scenario, but at times, hopefully your partner can kind of be like, I'm taking the child, so then you can go do you, right? Take care of whatever you need to take care of.
And we always talk about how important the restorative aspects of sleep are, and how if you're not sleeping well, then you're obviously not going to perform well. But one silver lining, Jen, is you're talking about sleeping in you put it down short 3-hour blocks, and we typically sleep in about 90-minute cycles. So if you're backing up 2 90-minute cycles to one another and awakening at the the appropriate time, it's not really the worst thing. So
probably not awakening at the appropriate time, though.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's optimal either.
It always seems to be that way, right?
Usually.
Oh, yeah. And getting out of bed for the 3rd time in a night definitely is not the most fun thing.
For athletes already, maybe not, they don't know this, but you go on triathlon forums, there's always a thread about this, is if you, or runners, if you can take your little kid out on a run in a stroller and then away, and that's when your partner will be like, you have a 2-hour run, go for it, right?
Yeah.
And the kids love it. They usually sleep the whole time, or they play. And you can. So I've done the Chariot stroller and the Bob stroller. I think the Bob stroller is a lot better for running.
Yeah.
The Chariot has all these like attachments that you can do, which is cool. But for pure running, I feel the Bob is better. And it's colder right now. The Bob also has a rain fly that you can get for the double or single.
Super
and it's
nice.
like this plastic thing. And what that does is, it doesn't rain here very much, but it keeps it warm. So we can do the rain fly on top, and you can bundle them up, and you just reach in, you touch their hands and their face, and they're toasty.
They're warm.
They love it. They're sitting in there. They're looking at everything, and then you get to do your workout, and then your partner gets to be by themselves.
And your child gets a change of pace too.
Exactly,
so
yeah.
It's a win-win-win.
Yeah, and sometimes, if they're fussy, hey, let's go for a run. And then they fall asleep. So everybody wins on that. And it's a good time, actually, to take up running because you get to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
Become a triathlete, everybody.
Another thing that I would say, too, is like if you have events, and I know they can be really motivating, and if you want to hold on to that, but one thing, too, it can be really tricky if you have this normal habit and practice of having events that you particularly go for. and you're like really stuck to that. And then just this, just how life is forcing you to live, it doesn't allow you to adhere to that. That can sometimes be more frustrating to a person to have goals but not be able to actually achieve those goals. So if you do have events, the one thing, if it's okay with you personally, I would just recommend pushing those events off, waiting to hold yourself to such strict goals, because you have an element of I guess, variability in your life that just takes priority. It's just kind of how it is. But man, it sure is rewarding. And one cool thing, my son, like whenever he sees people get on a bike or anything else like that, he's like, oh, he's going training. He knows it. And the one thing that I find, if you struggle as a parent to get in anything, at the very least, what you're doing is you're teaching your child an example that like it's worth it to work hard for these sort of things and take care of yourself. So even if you feel like you aren't accomplishing your goals, maybe you're teaching your child, and that's something that's really important with it. So it can be really hard. Don't beat yourself up over it. Next question is from Mike. He says 5 stars. And of course, we're going to read his question. I'm joking. If you ever send things in, when he says 5 stars, whether he's talking about rating on iTunes or Google Play, you can do that. It'd be awesome. If it's not 5 stars, let us know. But we certainly don't pick the questions based on people saying that. So he says, I'm 56 years old. My watts per kilo is about 3.4 watts per kilogram. I've been a roadie for a while, and this is my first cyclocross season, and it's eye-opening. I'm getting smoked by guys I destroy on the road, and I'm convinced I have to start practicing anaerobic hammer sessions till I puke. From my start through approximately the first lap or two, I'm maxed out at heart rate and RPE, and I feel like cyclocross is almost a sprinter sport whereby they just hammer, then try to survive the rest of the race. He says, should I have this mindset, and will I get used to these intense RPE rides? Can I see improvement this year by converting myself to that hammer or sprinter rider? Thanks, from Mike.
I want to start with just one thing before we get into the physiological aspects of this is I have experienced the same thing in both mountain biking and cross. And what the real issue for me is handling and brakes. I think you can lose a whole 1 watt per kilogram of like power just based on braking too much, not slowing down too much on the turns, because then you have to accelerate so much more.
It's a ton more work.
You have to put out so many more watts. So I would, unless you know that you are like you're not touching your brakes and you're just gliding through there, and all the corners, you're not losing time in all of those, I would look at that first. But Chad, you want to take it away?
Well, I was just going to say, first off, rule out that it's not a fitness disparity. I mean, make sure you're actually as fast as these guys. You say you are on the road, so make sure you are, because if they're taking off and they can do this for a lap or two without falling apart, and it's making you fall apart, either what Nate just described, or maybe you're simply not as fit as they are.
Yeah, that's something like on the road side. I see a lot of roadies come in, and so much strategy is involved on the road, right?
Yeah.
And you learn
and
how
you
to
can
race
hide on the road.
efficiently.
Yeah, totally.
And so like what happens is in cross, a lot of the time what I find is that your skills can mask a whole lot of the lack of fitness that you may have. But I think it's harder to kind of mask that that lack of fitness with cyclocross, because there's not as much benefit to drafting.
There's nowhere to hide.
You have to end up going way over your limit so many times, so your limits are really exposed. So even though you may destroy them on the road, that doesn't actually mean, and even though they may look like a Fred and you think you look super cool or something, they may be faster than you. Yeah. And that's just kind of, it's a tough pill to swallow, but that's a possibility. Yep.
And maybe if you don't have snap or a punch, or you can't sprint very well, certainly work on that, but it doesn't mean you have to convert yourself from one type of rider to a sprinter, because I'm here to tell you, none of these sports are sprinter sports. I mean, they're all endurance sports. So utilizing a sprint, having access to it, and cultivating one is absolutely, or not absolutely, but often enough beneficial. But it doesn't mean you have to focus all your training on becoming a better sprinter now. I mean, everything I always think about, I think it's the 2000 Olympics in Sydney. The German pursuit team set a world record that year. They did it on an amazing amount of low intensity, high volume. They didn't do any intensity until their 8-day taper prior to the event. And they went out and set a world record.
The German, what was it?
German pursuit squad. So that's a 4K effort. So we're talking
help me
4-ish minutes.
KOM?
Yeah, probably.
You guys, Nate at TrainerRoad.com. Come out to Reno.
But the point is, they're aerobically inclined. I mean, even for something like a 4-minute effort on a track, they're still very much aerobic athletes.
Yeah, you exhaust those anaerobic stores pretty quick with those efforts.
Yeah, and you can only use them so much and within frequency, and you have to use them selectively and whatnot. So while, again, I'll say that it's necessary to have that component, that tool in your toolbox, but that's not what the sport is. It's an endurance sport. So don't change things too drastically.
The way there's so many ways to describe it, but it's like your aerobic is like your foundation, and then you kind of hone the knife a little bit with the anaerobic work at the end. But that's not like that's 50% or 80%.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to underplay the importance of having a good anaerobic engine. That's absolutely necessary, but it doesn't mean you shift your training to become a sprinter.
You want to see people that are less fit than you. They're the people you pass on lap 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? Like they may start hard. Like at Reno Cross, for example, in the industry race, I had a sweet hole shot and I led for a lap. And then I just went like explosion, right? And my lack of fitness was exposed by the event that is cyclocross.
But even if you had a high level of fitness, maybe that's not the best way for you to race that course. And we were talking about Jeff Kabush is a really good example of someone who doesn't necessarily race like this, but races really well because he knows what his strengths are and he rides accordingly. Yeah,
and how he races it. And this is actually similar to what we saw from Keegan Swenson too, who is a very different rider in terms of like size. Keegan's very small, 140 pounds. Kabush is bigger for a cross-country mountain biker and cyclocross racer. He's probably around 175 maybe, I would think, somewhere around 170. So I may be wrong. I apologize, Jeff. But the point is both of them pace it way more evenly than we think. Like way more. Remember, I mean, Cross Vegas is one where you're basically riding through Velcro the whole time with the grass. But Keegan's normalized power and average power were extremely close.
Yeah, so I watched that race, and Keegan was with the front group the whole time, and you were pretty much the same weight. You guys have similar handling abilities.
Yep.
He's a little better than you, but
yeah, he's better than me.
But it's not like me and him where the breaks. But if we looked at your power versus his power, your difference between NP and AP, which is like how variable you are, you had a big difference. He was within like 10 watts, which means he did not surge as much out of the corners. He was very a lot smoother. Yep. And Chad, doesn't that take a less physiological toll?
Far lesser toll, yeah. Yeah, it just does. It's that simple.
And he was still in the lead pack.
Yep.
Right.
So how often were they getting off their bikes on a course like that? I don't remember. It didn't seem like there were too many dismounts.
I think there was any.
And that's going to have
think they may have gotten off.
That will have some bearing on normalized versus average.
Sure. But we were in the same race.
Yeah.
We did the same course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, right. So I think with us two, we're not as good at handlers as they are. So you could say, well, that's because, especially me, Nate hit his brakes. That's why he'd accelerate more. But with Jonathan, I would say that's not the case.
Right.
He just is smarter than you.
Yeah, and he keeps the power down when I let off and ease up, and I want to relax. He just keeps it consistent, but then that allows him to carry more momentum through things, so he has to accelerate less. Right. Yeah. It's really hard because you'll go into turns right now and you'll think there's no way I could go faster through this turn. But as your skills expand, you're able to do that. And it's kind of this difficult thing because as you become more technically, I guess, skilled, you actually don't have to race as hard, meaning that the punches don't have to be as hard.
Producer Nick, I put it in Slack. There was like the first couple laps of a UCI Pro race of GoPro footage. Yeah. It is the most intense cycling footage I've ever seen. Could you take that out and put it in the show notes? Because that shows you where you think like, oh, they're starting so hard, but they're just, it looks hard the whole time, but it is constant power. Yep. It's interesting to watch to see the intensity. And I mean, they're not going, obviously they can't go for 10 minutes 120% of threshold. No one can do that. Right. So they're at threshold, but it's just amazing to see how intense and strong that race is compared to when I race cross. It's not like that. No, it's not like that at all.
Yeah. My GoPro videos are never as interesting as that.
But yeah, that reminds me or brings up a point too that you have to consider the different dynamics of a road ride, even if it's kind of a surgy road ride versus a cross race. The cross race, okay, I don't know too many road rides that are an hour or less, but cross races are all an hour or less. So you can ride them very differently. I mean, you can exploit those anaerobic stores. I mean, just piss them away because you don't need to have them for that long.
Yep.
But on a road ride, it's very different. So again, this is a matter of playing your strengths, but also addressing chinks in the armor.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. The more I find, like, the more that we've looked into successful cyclocross racers, ones that do really well at high level, it just looks so different from the general perspective of what cyclocross is.
Smooth.
Looks
smooth is the
fluid and powerful.
Yep,
instead
absolutely.
Of flailing and miserable.
So Mike, that's how we look. It's true. Yeah. Way to call it how it is, Chad.
Break, sprint, break, sprint.
Yeah, exactly. So Mike, if you're feeling like this, don't fall into the trap that thinking cyclocross is just a sprinter sport. In fact, try sticking to your plan of just staying within yourself, and I bet you might even place better than you currently are, because you may be able to just carry more speed and be smoother. When you aren't in the red, it's also a whole lot easier to negotiate technical terrain. You know, when you can hardly breathe, it's really tough to be able to do that.
And plenty of other competitors will make the same mistake you're making, and they'll blow up, and you'll pick them up. So,
like I did at Reno Cross. Okay, from Sam, question says, "Hey fellas, my employer just moved offices to a new open office environment where everyone is in cubicles."
Cubicles is not an open.
That's not open. That just means
that's office space.
Yeah, that's office space. He says, which means that I get to put in headphones all day and catch up on the TrainerRoad podcast while working. Don't tell my boss. Good to hear, Sam. He says, "I've got a nutrition question for you. I'm targeting endurance mountain bike events in 2018. 6 to 10 hour long races. Those are long. That's real endurance stuff right there." He says, "And I'm planning on peaking for the Leadville 100. Fingers crossed that I get in. I've done long road rides before and a few 6-hour mountain bike rides, but as I'm doing more of these events this year, I want to spend more time dialing in my race nutrition in B races prior to Leadville." And for those that don't know, we usually refer to races in terms of priorities. So you'll have C priority races. There's like the weeknight races, low priority. The result doesn't matter. It's really more of a training race sort of a thing. B races, they might replicate the A race that you have selected in one way or more, and it gets you a little bit closer. You may not do like a full taper for these events. Maybe you do, but what you're really trying to do is kind of test things out more specifically, and an A event is your goal. So for explaining for folks, and we have a whole blog post on that. You can go blog.trainerroad.com. We talk about how to prioritize those. So he says, where would you suggest that I start in terms of refining my on-ride nutrition approach? Should I try racing on solids and a race on gels and a race on higher calorie drinks to see what works and sits best with me? What do you think? So this is what I'm in the middle of this right now.
Yeah, it's kind of how do you figure out what's the best nutrition for me for racing?
Yeah.
Which is highly individual.
And you don't want to do this on your goal day.
Yeah, this is great.
Highly individual and contingent upon a lot of things. So not only what your gut will tolerate in normal circumstances, but under different levels of intensity. Because doing something that's 9 or 10 hours long, like Leadville, for instance, versus doing a short criterium, excuse me, it's a lot easier for your gut to tolerate and digest when your intensity level is low. So I just want to put out there really quick. We see so often that we can absorb or utilize about 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. If we mix the sugars, we can nudge that up to 90. So I think like this new 90 is this magic number that everyone thinks I can deal with 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour. Can you? I mean, again, it's dependent on not just the intensity, but how well you tolerate certain foods. So even if you can tolerate 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour, what form do those carbohydrates have to come in? Mm-hmm. So it's not don't just think that I want to load myself to the gills. So I'm going to go out and I've got it all planned out. Here's my first 90 grams. Here's my second 90 grams. I'm going to do this for 7 hours and everything's going to go well. Yep. Probably not.
And that mix is, what Chad's talking about, is 60 grams of glucose and 30 grams of fructose.
Typically. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how I would go about it is there's something in computer science called a binary search.
I like that.
Because what it does is to find something, what you pretty much go is you go halfway in between, and then if that works, you go halfway in between and halfway in between. But I would actually start my binary search with the extreme, and then go halfway in between and figure out from there.
So you jump right up to 90 grams to see how that went?
Yeah, just to save time. Like, so if you only have a certain amount of B races, I would say, okay, so I think, like based on my research, gels are going to be absorb the best. This is what I'm saying, the best case without any stomach issues, right?
Sure.
So I would do gels. I would do the 90-60 mix. Mm-hmm. I would look at
90-30 or 60-30.
60-30, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. and with your sports drink. And then I would look at electrolytes too and try to get a...
But you're basing some of that on the fact that you can tolerate high levels of food. Because if I even shot for 60 grams an hour, depending on what it is, I know right now I couldn't tolerate it.
Well, yeah, so this is someone who's saying they don't know.
Starting from scratch.
Yep, so I would just start it once, because I think a lot of people, they've never, ever tried it.
Yeah.
Try it. If you, in the middle of the race, you start to feel horrible, don't continue the race at that same level of digestion. You can stop it there, and the next time you go, okay, I'm going to try half of that.
But why not
try half the thing?
Why not start on the lighter side of things at 60 or something that you can tolerate, or is more likely that you can tolerate, and then work up from there? And if in the middle of the race you hit a low spot, well, you just ingest more.
Yeah, then I don't know.
It's just two different ways to skin that same cat. I just think your way is a little riskier in terms of gut intolerance.
And
if there's an optimal, I'd like to shoot for the optimal faster than the suboptimal.
I see what you're getting at there. The one thing that can be tough, though, is that even these B races, these B races may be costing you money, costing you time, doing those sort of things, and you still want to be able to get the most out of it.
Well.
And in that case, I think it's good to favor the conservative approach, as long as you have a strategy to reach that inflection point where things start to turn, like you're talking about.
I mean, even 60 grams an hour was pretty low intensity. It's been, 6 to 10 hours. That does change things. But again, I would rather err on the more conservative side, just because I know from personal experience that I'd rather run out of gas and feel like I need to vomit for a substantial portion of the race.
So this is highly individual. Let's talk about the principles. In other words, you have an experiment that you're doing with food. How do you know if it's working or not? I know that sounds silly. You'll know when it doesn't work because your gut will really hurt. But finding out when it's actually working in terms of helping cycling improve or cycling performance can actually be a little bit more tricky. You might feel fine, but it might not be optimal. So the trick with
the log.
One thing that I do is I use, because these don't have to be your B races. Use this in your training and
absolutely use it in your training.
Approach this.
That's where you start to narrow things in.
Yeah, approach this basically when you have these training lines. Basically go out and replicate the sort of intensity that you'll be riding at for those races.
That's key,
pay
because
attention.
If you try to do a super low intensity workout for 2 hours and you eat all this food, I never do it in training unless it's maybe. But other than that, it's not. I don't replicate. It's not the intensity of race day, and it doesn't require actually 100 grams an hour.
On race day.
Yeah, it doesn't require normal rides are not 100 grams an hour.
Exactly right. So when you have a training that's going to be to replicate the sort of dance, it doesn't have to be the same distance or same duration. But the intensity that you'll be riding out on race day, it's a really good opportunity to refine that. And the one thing that I feel like is that it's really, I guess, a lot of people, when they go out and they start taking in this sort of nutrition, ride intensity, and if they do it, they'll just check it off. And I find that when I ride sweet spot, particularly if I'm going to do a race like this, that's where sweet spot either feels fine when you have fuel, or it feels really bad. And I feel like when you go to VO2, there are more factors that could be influencing that. When you go to lower intensity, there are more factors. But I feel like sweet spot is a good spot where if you aren't feeling appropriately, it does feel dramatically different. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, there's definitely a switching point.
Yeah,
and that even happens on. I love 2-hour sweet spot TrainerRoad workouts, and on that, if I have not eaten well that day, or not eaten enough carbohydrate, or not fueled during the ride, it gets to be.
I agree with you guys. I think
easy to extremely hard.
That's a perfect intensity level to start to dial nutrition, because almost any type of race will involve a fair amount of that sort of effort level.
Yeah. Climbs, right?
Yeah, so many things.
On these longer races, usually the climbs are going to be sweet spot, and then the non-climbs are going to be more aerobic.
Right.
Normal.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's you just furthered my point. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is something that everybody should be doing when you have these rides that are going to replicate whatever your goal event is, and that may just be a big day in the mountains, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be a specific A race or something. Use these rides that you're doing that are similar to it in intensity to really test things.
We have plans, so many things we want to do, but I'd like to have more of a response or emails if you have problems with sweet spot workouts, that we talk about fueling and nutrition, because some people, so you do the ramp test and you do, say, 10-minute intervals of sweet spot. That should be not so hard, right? That with rest.
If properly nourished.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. If properly nourished. But some people, they get through 2 or 3 of those, and then they start to you feel like it takes a lot of willpower. You can get a little bit shaky. It can get extremely hard to repeat those. Yeah. And I can see if it's a 30-minute interval, you may have some muscular endurance has been trained up. But really, 10 minutes of sweet spot shouldn't be so hard.
And sweet spot workouts are perfect for really recognizing when that deterioration or that rapid decline starts to happen. I mean, one interval feels great, the next interval feels a bit of a struggle, and then everything goes to hell.
I did this 2 years ago where I wasn't fueling properly. Yeah. I was trying to lose weight while I was doing long sweet spot workouts. And you can look back at my rides, and they have all these like gaps in between where like in between the interval, I'd have to rest for like
stop and cry for a minute.
Yeah, for like a minute or two. Yeah. And even some of them I wrote in the notes, like I'd stop and I had this like, this is bad, don't eat this. But my wife gave me Pub Mix for Christmas, and I had it in the office. I didn't have any other gels in the office, and I just like went into a cabinet and just ate all of this Pub Mix all at once because I was so like you can feel yourself get like
it's
low
a miserable
blood sugar.
Feeling,
yeah, and then it takes a while to get back too.
Yeah,
it doesn't happen.
10, 15 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like 15 minutes for me before it starts to come back up.
Sure. Yeah, it takes time to get that food back into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
This is if you are doing something like this, or I should say, if you do have a plan also that you've had in place, don't be worried about playing with it, in the off season as you're going into things and changing things. Like I've had things that have just worked for me, yet I'm trying everything right now, all different sorts of nutrition products and different approaches. It's good to use, especially that early season time to really experiment.
There's a lot of products out there, a lot of different ways you can go about nutrition too. I mean, it doesn't have to be manufactured products. It can be
a journey.
Plain old whole food.
Yeah. You might be, whole food might be your jam.
Yep.
Literally.
I got it.
The last thing I just want to say about this is I found it's hard to have training replicate race day. I've said this, people say nothing new on race day. Race days, everything's new. So like Lost and Found and Carson City. Lost and Found really for me was an eye-opener. This last year, that was 100 miles. It took like 6.5 hours. That was the first time that I went.
A miserable day.
Yeah. Some people it took longer, Chad. That was the first time that I had done that much food. And I actually went over a little bit during the race and realized, this is a limit. That's why I kind of like the ability to go over. And that has opened me up to doing better at longer races by having that. And I would never push myself that hard in training and be able to eat that much.
Totally.
For me, it's like it was like a week or two of recovery after that. But anyways, I like using an actual event to test this stuff out.
Yeah.
Next one is from Cat3 Memes. He says, and if you don't know, Cat3 Memes is on Instagram, and it's pretty hilarious to follow. So you should give it a look. He says, "Hey guys, I love the podcast and listen every week. I have a question related to something that I don't think you've addressed, although I may have missed it, and that I've never really seen addressed anywhere else. My question concerns breathing rate. Several years ago, I had a VO2 max test conducted, and I scored about as well as expected. But the technician running the test said I had an unusually low breathing response, i.e. my breath rate seemed to almost top out at a certain intensity and then increase much more slowly than usual at increasing levels of exertion. The test was part of someone's non-cycling related PhD work, and the researcher administering the test had no idea how or if this would affect cycling performance specifically. I've never heard breathing rate mentioned as a metric or even a variable anywhere, and no one is riding with a breathe rate monitor that I know of. Or a breath rate monitor, forgive me. So he says, my question is whether the rate and intensity of ventilation is something that worth being conscious of or even trying to train in some way, or perhaps whether it's something so automatic that the body that we don't even, or that we aren't even capable of controlling it. Years ago, I used to do occasional yoga sessions, and oftentimes nowadays in high-stress race situations, I notice myself deliberately but unintentionally pacing my breathing in a yoga-esque manner, a kind of stay calm and take a deep breath style routine. I think this is just a reaction to stress I've developed over the years and imported into cycling, but I wonder if I might be hindering my body's oxygen intake at high intensity. Are hyperventilation intervals the next big thing in cycling, or am I overthinking something that will take care of itself if I just train to power like usual? Anyways, thanks again.
Yeah, so if the last couple of books I read are any indication, it's just the opposite.
Interesting.
So I'm going to give you the long answer, and then I'm going to give you the very short answer. The long answer, I'm hoping to do a bit of education along the way. So some of this may not apply exactly to Cat3 Meme's question.
Gotcha.
But I'm going to talk about it anyway. So just some respiratory basics. So we talk about breathing volume and breathing rate, volume being the amount of breathing you do, rate being just how many breaths you take per minute. Their volume is the air into the lungs. So typically we're talking about 10 to 12 breaths per minute. So that's a pretty standard breathing rate. And we bring in about 500 milliliters of oxygen per breath, or if you want to get more specific, I think it's 7 milliliters per kilogram of body weight, body mass. Sorry. And we're talking tidal volume here. So we're talking just gentle breath in, gentle breath out, what you do all day long. And then one typically influences the other. So if you're the type of person to take long, deep breaths, maybe you're only breathing 5-6 times a minute, but now you're breathing a full liter of air per breath. So in any case, it kind of balances out the same thing. We're talking at rest here, obviously. Okay, so there's breathing rate, breathing volume. Then hemoglobin, if you remember, we talked about this a while back, is the oxygen-carrying protein found in blood. Okay, which brings us to SpO2, which is the oxygen saturation, something we can commonly measure with just a pulse oximeter. Fingertip pulse oximeter does a pretty good job. That actually measures peripheral flow rather than arterial flow, but the only way to measure arterial flow is to actually do a blood draw. So I'm not going to do that. And the correlation is high enough that it's actually a usable device. And all this tells us, all SpO2 tells us, is the fraction of oxygen-saturated hemoglobin to the regular hemoglobin. So how much of our red blood cells, and how much of the hemoglobin in our red blood cells is oxygen-saturated? Got it. And typically it's high. It's like 95, 99% oxygen saturation in our blood most of the time. Drop down to like 90%, and it's considered hypoxemic. So low blood oxygen. Lower than that, get down to like 80, and that's when the stuff really starts to come down. That's when organ failure, brain failure, things, bad stuff happens.
Quick, when I did my sleep study, I was down to 80% when I had sleep apnea.
I believe it, and that's not unheard of or not uncommon.
And that's not even low. Like some people get down in the 50s, and that's where it can have like sleep apnea can seriously reduce your lifespan.
Yeah.
Whoa,
that's that we breathe in comes right back out. 75%. During exercise, it goes as high as 25%. And these aren't hard numbers. Obviously, they can change a bit. But the point is, plenty of oxygen in the system. So bigger breaths. We'll get to this. So when you breathe in, this is a new term to me. More oxygen than is necessary. It's coined, or it's termed overbreathing. Whether this is a new term in the context of these two books and these two authors, or if it's a term that's been out there for quite some time, I don't know. But the gist of it is breathing is influenced by carbon dioxide more so than oxygen. I mean, the brain senses the difference or the level of carbon dioxide, the level of oxygen, level of blood acidity, and it adjusts breathing accordingly. But CO2 is one of those influences. So our primary breathing stimulus, according to these two books, I should probably name them later, but I can't think of them off the top of my head, is to eliminate carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a product of aerobic metabolism, right? So when we break down fuels, it yields as two of the byproducts, carbon dioxide and water. So we don't breathe in carbon dioxide. We're not getting it from the atmosphere. We're actually getting it from aerobic metabolism that takes place inside the body. But when we breathe out our CO2, crucially, some of it is retained. We hang on to some of it. And why is that? It's because carbon dioxide helps us offload oxygen to our cells. So carbon dioxide is necessary for us to impart oxygen to the working muscles, or to the organs, to your heart, to your brain. And we talked about this a while back, the Bohr effect, which describes the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. So what is the affinity of your hemoglobin to oxygen? The stronger that affinity is, the less it relinquishes at the muscle, the less work you can do, the more limited you are. And this is explained, or this is evident when you go to elevation. The blood saturation maybe hasn't changed at all, but your body's willingness, or your hemoglobin's affinity for oxygen, is stronger. It doesn't want to let that oxygen go. It takes place, over a couple of days. It starts to relinquish the reins a bit, but then other things start to happen. But in any case, this affinity for oxygen is influenced by the amount of CO2 in your blood. It's also influenced by blood acidity, but we're not going to cover that today. So just be clear that hemoglobin releases oxygen in the presence of CO2. We need CO2 in the system.
Got it.
So if we overbreathe, the idea is that we're discharging too much, or we're intaking too much oxygen, discharging too much. This is still fairly new to me, but overbreathing basically washes too much CO2 from the body.
Got it.
It puts us in a state of hypocapnia. So hemoglobin holds on to the oxygen, and what we don't want. We want a looser bond so that we can impart, again, more oxygen to the working muscle.
Makes sense.
So there's quite a lot of information, and I'm pretty much reeling, but most of this makes sense. I mean, there's some new ideas that are a bit We'll see where they go, and maybe we'll talk about them at some point. But they're a little out there. But that's not to say. I mean, we used to think lactic acid was poison, and we've since found out that it's actually a very usable fuel. Yeah. So this may be the new trend. We may find things that are actually beneficial. But my point here is that it sounds to me, and that being the long answer, it sounds to me like the short answer is you simply have greater stroke volume. Your heart, your left ventricle pushes out a ton of blood to the muscles, so you're delivering a lot of oxygen per breath, which means your breathing rate is going to be low. Breathing rate and heart rate are tied linearly. So the faster you breathe, faster your heart beats, et cetera, and vice versa. So personally, I think you just have the ability to push a lot of oxygen with each beat of your heart.
Interesting.
Another way to say this for dumb people is like me. Your body can only absorb so much oxygen.
Actually, let me get to that point too,
okay.
And then you can restate it if this is still too busy.
No, I love it, Chad.
Okay, so you're talking about intake, how much oxygen or how much air really you're getting into your lungs, where the concern is really uptake, and the uptake takes place. Well, first off, it takes place in the bloodstream. How much hemoglobin is carrying how much oxygen to the muscle, and then once it gets to the muscle, how much does it let go? How much can the muscle actually utilize? How many mitochondria are there? How many aerobic enzymes are there? What's the capillarization in the muscle bed? All these things that convey the oxygen to the muscle. So that's the concern, and we influence that uptake very differently than just drawing bigger breaths into the lungs. That comes with aerobic adaptation. That comes with training. That comes with doing fasted rides. That comes with just logging a lot of miles or hitting the VO2 max intervals really hard.
So I don't want to get this wrong. If I get it wrong, please someone correct me and we'll correct it. But on my VO2 max test, the first one I did, as they ramp you up and they can see how much oxygen you're using. Mm-hmm. And then you get to a point where even though your breathing has increased, you can't take any more oxygen in. Yeah. That's your VO2 max.
Yeah.
But your breathing still increases and you expel more CO2 from anaerobic stores. Yeah. And the guy who was testing it was like, oh yeah, we could have stopped earlier, but I wanted to see how deep you could go, man. Like this is cool, like to see how much you can push past that point. So when people have like products of, there's this thing that's going to make you have deeper breaths or somehow getting more air. It's not the intake, the air into your lungs that is your limiter. It is your body uptaking the amount of oxygen. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're training for, and that's what we're training with adaptions. I was a music major, and tuba was my instrument. Boy, did I have a big intake, right? But that didn't mean I had this crazy VO2 max. Sure. Like I'm a tall guy too. I could fill my lungs a ton.
That's just lung volume.
And I did swimming at the same time, which is another one where you intake a lot of air at once. So that's kind of like, I always laugh when I see those products. It's like
to train your inspiratory muscles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not your limiter. That's not your limiter.
That's so far down the chain. I don't even know that there's a point where someone is limited by that.
Yeah.
I think there are other things that will limit you in place of that. I mean, I don't think you can ever get to worrying about your inspiratory muscles unless you have some form of degenerative disorder.
And as far as Cat 3 memes, like saying, I like calling Cat 3 memes, that he likes to like relax during rides. Like totally. That's great.
It's huge.
Yeah, that's great.
It's really helpful.
And
especially if you have larger stroke volume like that, he can actually effectively perhaps deliver a little bit
more.
Well,
I mean, who was it? Go on. I got to think for a second. There's someone who was talking about, is a high-level athlete. Oh, it was, we just watched it, Lionel Sanders.
Yeah.
I mean, his heart rate peaks at about, I think he said his peak heart rate is like 169. So he operates at 150. So even when he's working at literally 390 watts on the bike, he's breathing at like 155 BPM. So same idea here. Just because he's not taking in or is not panting like a dog doesn't mean he's not processing a whole lot of oxygen.
It's like you too, Chad. You have a low heart rate.
I do too. It's almost like the exactly same numbers, except for the 390 part. But I like top out. I top out at about 169, 170 is my peak heart rate.
Right.
And it's probably a little lower by now because I haven't checked it in quite some time. And then my threshold heart rate or my comfortable sweet spot-ish heart rate, I mean, I can be 145 to 155 right in that range. It never gets that high.
I just want to say that it sounds like Cat 3 Memes is kind of worried that he might be doing himself
limiting
harm by relaxing and trying to slow breathing. But I would argue, I don't know if this is true, but I'll just say it anyways, that you can't I know this is true. You can't restrict, like if your body, it's a involuntary response. So if you're doing a VO2 max effort, you can't suddenly say, oh, I'm just going to breathe at the slower rate, because you would pass out.
Right.
It just happens what happens.
Yeah, the workload will dictate.
Exactly. The workload influences your breathing rate. And sometimes you can, like, it's more of how Chad said, it's the combination between the volume and the rate. Because sometimes you can say, okay, I'm going to try to relax here and take in a bigger breath, and then that slows in the rate, but the amount of uptake or intake is going to be the same because you're breathing in more. And that's not a bad thing to do. It's in the coaching text, like, relax. You don't need to have everything tight all the time. You can save a little bit of energy.
Shallow breathing has gotten a bad rap, but the more I'm learning, the more I'm reading, it's not the worst thing at all. And these big cleansing deep breaths are actually what's leading or in the moment to over breathing. Long-term overbreathing actually has greater ramifications, again, according to these two things. And there are studies to back them up. I haven't dove into them yet, so I don't feel confident really pushing this conversation any further.
Yeah. I'm going to recap this for average Joes, and you tell me when I'm wrong. Okay. Okay.
It's best I understand it.
In short, we can breathe in as much air as we want, but our body can only absorb so much oxygen from that breath.
Yeah, your blood only gets so saturated with oxygen.
So, and as we work harder, our breathing rate goes up. Probably a natural response that the body has to increase demand for oxygen and increase work.
Yep.
And it gets to a point where we top out, but then our breathing rate can still go up from there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting more oxygen once again.
Correct. Again, as I understand it.
There we go. Yeah. So it's something that if you breathe really fast, really crazy fast like that, don't necessarily worry about it. One thing that I think is interesting with this too is that you see a lot of people kind of tie in, like, I was completely out of breath, and that was like a really hard effort. But the one thing, and this is a perfect segue into the next question, which is John's question. It's more about warm-ups. But I have found that, and I don't know, and Chad hasn't researched this point or anything else, but I have found that when I first start out, in my first hard effort of the day, that one I always feel like my breathing rate is accelerated. But I haven't gotten some processes in order. Once I actually get warmed up, then it feels like everything is more in sync.
Yeah, for those high intensity efforts, there's a couple explanations for that.
Right.
First hard effort's always the hardest.
Always feels the hardest, right?
John.
Yeah. John says, I'm very happy with TR's structured plans and workouts. I usually watch your podcast on YouTube. Superb quality of each of you bring is why I became a TrainerRoad user. Awesome. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
He says, I'm training for the Iron Horse Bicycle Classic, the Coca-Cola Road Race in 2019. So first of all, I just want to full stop here. That is the coolest race. It's in Durango, first of all, which is like
Colorado.
And if people don't know, I mean, John Tomac's from Durango. We have Howard Grotz, who's from Durango. Ned Overend from Durango.
That's right. Yeah.
Payson McKelvin, Sepp Kuss. We have like a countless, and so many other people that I'm forgetting.
Do you know what the elevation is there?
Yeah, I want to say that it's around our elevation, 5,000, maybe a bit more. But incredible place, and it has a ton of cycling history and talent that comes from that spot. But this race that they have, the Iron Horse Bicycle Classic, like they have a road race, which is the Coca-Cola Road Race, and then they also have a mountain bike race. And the mountain bike race goes through the town, and it enters a bar, and the bar is like on a really steep hill. So you enter the bar from the top, you go through the bar, and then they knock the balcony off the deck that's in front of the bar, and then they have like a ramp that goes 2 stories down after that. So you like ride out into the bar, then out of the bar down a 2-story ramp. It's pretty cool.
Elevation 6,500 feet or about 2,000 meters.
That makes pretty good sense.
So anyways, it looks like just a super cool weekend in general. They have like a straight line pump track race down the main street. It's really cool. So anyways, I want to do this too, John. He says it's an age group start. 55 to 64 is my age group. He says that I'm 59 years old. If you know what the start is like, could you comment on it for a trainer warm-up that would benefit before being called up? Typically, everyone stands around and freezes for 45 minutes before rolling out of Durango. The first 10 miles is rolling in flat before the climbs start. I'll be wearing the TrainerRoad thermal skin suit this next year. Yeah, and plan on sending in a photo with myself on my first podium. If you have questions about how to get that kit, you can just go on to forum.trainerroad.com.
Yeah, and that thermal skin suit, it's a Jackaroo one. I actually use that too during cross season.
Yeah.
There's pictures of me wearing that in the forum.trainerroad.com post about how to buy it, and it's very warm. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. So warm-ups. This is like an interesting point, and actually, and Chad, you're going to get into some science on this.
Just a bit.
Before we get into that, I wanted to share. I was actually asking Keegan with his Stan's Pivot team this weekend what his warm-up strategy was like, and his teammates, and all 4 of them have very different warm-up strategies, right? They have similar elements to them. But the one thing about warming up is that it's likely, it doesn't mean that you can't adapt something that somebody else does, but in many cases it's something you develop individually, or you at least, repeat. So it may be something that's highly individual, and everybody's body responds slightly differently to things.
Yeah, and certainly tied to the intensity of the race start.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to roll out for a 10-mile neutral start, warm-up's not nearly as crucial as it is if you're starting a mountain bike race that's going to go hard from the start.
Mm-hmm. And it's usually a cold race, but a warm-up more than anything isn't necessarily just to get warm.
Yeah, so when we talk about warming the muscles, I take that to mean raising the blood temperature. And I've had this little statistic typed in my sheet for quite some time, and I haven't been able to really verify it. So if anybody has information on this and can back it up, I'd appreciate it. But it talks about hemoglobin giving off twice as much oxygen when raised by 5 degrees centigrade. So even if those aren't hard numbers, and I'm sure they're not, but if it gives off substantially more oxygen when there's just a slight bump in muscle temperature or blood temperature, well, there's one reason for a warm-up, especially if you're going to go out hard.
They give you more oxygen, more aerobic energy, less anaerobic expenditure.
Yep, exactly.
The whole deal. All the benefits that you would get from it.
And then the second aspect, if you're going to go out super hard, is to get the lactate shuttling processes rolling. Mm-hmm. So we shuttle lactate between muscle fibers, and then we shuttle lactate back into the system through the liver into the bloodstream and potentially back out to those same muscles. So, and those shuttles take a bit of work to get going. So just like when you do a 5x3 VO2 max workout, that first 3-minute effort is gut wrenching. And the second one seems somehow a little bit better, or maybe obviously a little bit better, maybe the third one as well, because those lactate shuttling processes are rolling.
I like to think that I shuttle lactate through my hair and fingernails at this point after seeing how much lactate I produce. But it's a key thing that I think, we haven't talked about that specific benefit on warm-ups in the sense that the shuttling process is something that you want to get going. And so then when you start the race, you won't be behind the curve, because that's the thing with if the shuttling process isn't already in place and working, then you'll find yourself with lactate pooling up when it shouldn't be pooling up instead of being reprocessed into fuel.
Yeah, and this is one of the many things I learned over the the summit last weekend and the masterclass that followed it, information on both of which I'm going to share with you guys at a later time. I just got the slide deck yesterday, so I can go over. The USAC summit was largely split sessions, which means I could only be in one place at one time, so I missed the other session. I would like to watch those other sessions, and I also want to review some of the sessions, the ones I was present for, so that I can make sure that my notes are in fact accurate, and just basically share my learnings in the most concise manner.
Yeah, that'll be cool. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm excited.
That'll be sweet.
When I was a brand new triathlete, I always thought in my mind, like, I can only go hard so many times. So why would I go hard in a warm-up?
Yeah.
Right? Because I was
why would I burn a match?
Why would I? Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Because I'm going to need that later. Like, this triathlon is going to destroy me. The sprint triathlon is going to destroy me.
Yeah.
So what I want to do for warming up is, like, I would go super, super duper easy. And I would never do those short, kind of thresholdy hard, short in duration efforts.
Yeah, and it's not to say you can't get away with not doing them. It just means you're basically going to do that warm-up effort during the race, and that can really derail your motivation.
Especially with this race having 10 miles of rolling hills before you get to climbs. I guarantee you there are going to be guys that do not want that race just to be decided on that climb, right? Like, you will want to make something happen before then, cause some sort of, like Pete's move. Like, when Pete shows up at a race like that, Pete wants to get away early, right, and make people chase.
What happens in triathlons is you don't warm up on the swim, and then at the beginning of a swim in a triathlon, you're extremely excited, so RPE is low. It all goes off. Everyone's going so fast, and it's very easy to go. It's very easy to get caught up and have like a mountain bike style start.
Yeah.
You might not be a good swimmer. You're like, I don't want to, tire out my swim muscles. And then you get in this state where even though you could swim the distance or you had a great training in the pool, it's completely different on race day in open water. You freak out. You have a horrible swim because you pretty much go way too hard. You're not warmed up. Everything's harder than it should have been.
Yeah.
And then you react and you end up like breaststroking and I hate this.
Yeah, because you can't just stop when you're swimming.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't just stop and recover.
Well, then it's a good tip for swimmers, triathletes, to do hard starts before the race. Like to do a nice warm up, get your shoulders going, and then you'll see it. People do about 10 minutes before the race. They'll do, or
just
even
like
5 minutes.
10-yard hard starts.
Exactly. Yep. And some people even run in and they'll go 30 seconds like almost sprinting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All the top people, you definitely see them do it. And in Kona, you'll see them do it out in the water and stuff to get started. It's very important. Even if you don't aren't going to be in that lead pack, just get that. It makes the swim actually feel easier. And I used to believe when I was new that I only, you only had so many things in your body that you could do.
Yeah. Perhaps not to that level. So
and then John, I wanted to make a finer point, and this is probably more due to or more related to more technical starts. So whether it's a criterium or even a road race, but anything that requires a fair level of coordination, maybe not just riding a gentle century, and it doesn't really matter if you're cold to start, but you actually need coordination from the start. All the physiology aside, just consider the fact that cold muscles don't really function that well. So if for no other reason, warm yourself up so that you have a better level of coordination.
That's me at the top of whenever I'm backcountry skiing and I get to the top and then I sit there and I'll open up a thermos and drink something, but I just sit there for a bit.
Take some photos.
And then and take some photos. And at that point I try to flip my bindings back into position, change my boots over, do those things, and I just don't work anymore. You just get so cold up there. So let's go into Hector's question, shall we?
Let's do it.
He says, my heart rate usually increases during long, steady workouts, even when I am working on the target power zone. If the workout is long and steady, my beats per minute, in other words, his heart rate, they will not be stable for the whole workout duration, even if the power is consistent. So he says, if I am working in zone 2 or zone 3 with my power and my heart rate is still going up, am I actually getting the benefits of an aerobic endurance workout, or should I observe or respect that beats per minute and reduce my power to keep me into that heart rate zone? This is a question we get a ton where people ask okay, well, I'm in a power zone, but my heart rate is climbing and it's doing something else. Which one do I follow? And first of all, it's normal to see this.
Absolutely normal. So it's cardiac drift. Other people have put different terms on it, but it's basically just the separation of heart rate from steady power output. Power output remains the same. Heart rate starts to drift away from it subtly over time. And it's attributed to fatigue and slow twitch fibers, so more recruitment of higher end fibers that require different fuel sources, dehydration, your blood gets a little more viscous and a little harder to pump, so it has to work a little harder. Regardless of what explains it, it's going to happen. It's part of fatigue. It's going to happen. As far as does that mean should I lower my effort so that my heart rate stays steady? I can't think of too many cases to support that unless you just know you're going to ride for a long, long time.
Right.
Outside of that, just forget about the heart rate and keep your effort level pretty steady. Over those long rides, there's a benefit into depleting those fibers that can go all day. They start to fatigue, and then you start to recruit up the continuum. You get those mid-twitch fibers, and even some of the fast-twitch fibers start to garner some of the aerobic or the endurance benefits that all of us are very much after. So it's not the worst thing to start cycling through that and to see your heart rate start to rise if you know you're starting to recruit muscle that wouldn't otherwise get recruited if you hadn't reached this point.
So not only it's you want it. Yeah. You want it to happen on the long rides.
Like I said, I'm hard pressed, or I'm having a hard time trying to decide why you would just keep on tamping your heart rate or your power down to keep that heart rate exactly steady.
Personally, when I see this happen, I'm not sad. I'm actually oh, good. I'm getting the benefit. I'm actually making some change here. You know what I mean? It's not a bad thing in my mind when I see that drift away and change like that. That's no problem. And I guess, like you said, perhaps it depends a bit on the type of effort you want to do. But really, in the end, if you do see these things drifting farther apart, don't worry. And if you're doing a power-based workout, you want to focus on the work being done. And the work being done is going to be driving things, and that's what you really want to focus on. Is there anything else that you want to add on this one? It's a really common question that we get. Simple answer, but common question.
Yeah, no, I think we covered it pretty well.
Cool. Andrew's question. This one's fun, theoretical. He says, this should be a quick one. Love the podcast, and thank you guys for all that you do. Thank you. Appreciate it, Andrew. He says, I'm entered in a 160 kilometer, that's a 100-mile race, with about 1,750 meters, that's about 5,700 feet of climbing. Do I take 2 bottles of water or 1? Knowing that water stops are every 25 kilometers, every 16, 17 miles maybe.
I'm guessing this is a road race.
Yep. Yeah. He says, any other tips for an event like this? I've been a cyclist for a few years now, but it's your podcast that inspired me to enter into a race. Nice. Way to go. So he throws in some links to the event there. But so this is interesting. you have a long day, a 100-mile race with 5,700 feet of climbing, which isn't actually a whole lot of climbing for 100 miles. At least for, around here, it's kind of tough to actually do that, to get 100 miles with that amount of climbing, at least from what we're used to. But it's still significant enough. So the question of taking 2 bottles or 1, since he has stops every 16 kilometers, and it sounds like he's planning to make those stops.
60 miles.
Yeah, exactly. 25 kilometers. It sounds like he's planning on taking stops there. If he already is, I totally would not carry 2 bottles. I would just carry 1.
Depends how much you drink and how hot it is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's way worse to want that extra bottle, or you find out that an aid station isn't set up.
Yeah.
Which sometimes happens. Mm-hmm. And if you are okay stopping every 16 miles, to me, I wouldn't want to stop every 16 miles.
Right.
I would rather carry 2 bottles. And especially you might be in a group, especially on something like this. I actually just thinking about it right now, I would rather have 2 bottles, because groups, you get in a nice group and they skip that first one. Mm-hmm. That's it depends on how you're going for time or just completion, but I'd rather stay in the group and not wait for where everyone stops in the next one with the 2 bottles.
Well, just what was the downside of carrying that second bottle? I mean, are we talking about the weight
pounds.
penalty, the aero penalty? I mean, are these things that really matter on a 100-mile ride with not a heck of a lot of climbing? And are you really getting after it? Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a lot of climbing and you're worried about that sort of thing, you could drop down to 1 if you're planning to stop it every time. You could, but it's not necessarily needed. The one thing you might want to do is just carry that extra bottle on there, because the bottle itself doesn't weigh much. The water is what weighs more, or the drink is what weighs more inside of it. You can carry the extra one, so then if you really do find yourself stretching, going, skipping one or anything else like that, you can, end up filling it up. There's also science that points to bottles being in cages actually in some cases is variable, being more aerodynamic.
Depends on the bike.
Yep, depending on the bike and the bottle. But in some cases, it's more aerodynamic than not having one in there. So that could help you. And with these long days, I feel like you want to care more about aerodynamics perhaps than weight, especially on a day with just 5,700 feet of climbing.
Well, if Andrew's in a group, though, then
it
you don't
goes
really
away.
care. And you could, if you know you can get really nitpicky, which I did, Powerline climb at Leadville. If you know there's an aid station at the top of, actually I didn't do it, but at the top of a climb, you can spray your bottle out. You see pros do it. Please don't litter your bottle. But if you've got 2 full bottles and you're like, oh, there's an aid station in 20 minutes, I'm not going to drink all of these.
Yep.
And you really care and you're not going to make it up. But normally I don't do that, because it's not going to make or break my race.
No.
To share an example of how this, considering this though, and I know that it sounds like, okay, I just carry 2 bottles, do that. But it really can be beneficial for you to actually think about these things and think about how much you actually need. And I think to Park City Point to Point, when Keegan Swenson raced that, he had people stationed at different aid stations all over the place with a Camelback that he was just going to use for a very short period of time, or a bottle that he was just going to use for a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. And he would take that Camelback off and drop it at the next aid station when he rode through, and then he would grab something else. So when you're splitting hairs and you're really fighting toward the pointy end of the race, it is worth questioning things like this.
For sure.
When those marginal benefits are actually meaningful.
It absolutely
is.
If
he plans on stopping every 25K.
In this case, you're totally fine. But it does make for something interesting. And you also look at, when you are looking at that, what do you want to fill up with every time? Do you need to fill up with, or are you just planning on filling up with water? When should you fill up with mix? How should you end up, balancing that out throughout the whole thing? In other words, get granular about your nutrition strategy.
I have done on a triathlon, I've done a few triathlons, halves and a full, where I carry 3 bottles, 1 between the arms, 1 behind, and 1 between the legs, or 2, actually, not between the legs. I do 2 behind. And a lot of those, I carried a bottle the whole time, an extra bottle the whole time. Yeah. And part of that because I was scared to lose it, but also with triathlons.
Safety blanket.
Yeah, safety blanket, because you can easily miss a bottle at the stations.
Sure.
I had once, they gave me a Gatorade bottle, but they didn't take the stuff off on the inside. They didn't open it.
The cap.
Yeah, the safety thing. They're supposed to take it off.
Yeah, you can't do that when
you're riding in aero bars. Yeah. So I had to. On that race, I actually didn't have an extra bottle, because normally I would have just they always have a drop zone right after that. I would have been got frustrated, dropped it, and gone. I pulled over, did it. I lost to my buddy in a different way by 7 seconds. I was like, no, which doesn't really matter at all, but there is an idea on those ones to have a little bit of safety, and that's what I'm kind of talking with Andrew is if you do run out and it's a hot day, it's way worse than the 2-pound penalty.
Totally.
Yeah. But if you're Keegan and like it's your career is like you need to win.
Or if
this is how you make money.
Or if you're pushing just for an A race and it's a really important race and that sort of thing makes a difference.
You have a huge goal, and you're okay with
don't have to be
the
pro.
goal or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Final question is from Lucas, and if you're with us on the live stream, stick with us. We'll answer some of the questions you've submitted. He says, I'm a mountain bike rider focused on marathons mostly, marathon mountain bike races. He doesn't mean that he's focusing on running, being a mountain biker. He says, I use TrainerRoad as one of my training tools. And he says, so I either use TrainerRoad as a second training in a day now, and we'll use it as only a tool during the deep winter days. Hey, however you use it, we love it. So he says, past weekend I had a discussion with a good friend of mine who is an ex-pro mountain bike rider. And he told me that I am not able to train for marathon mountain bike races or mountain bike stage races with trainer sessions, mentioning that interval training never replaces long endurance miles outside. I tried to tell him that training techniques have changed since he was a pro and that it is not needed to sit 5 to 6 hours a day to get the fitness needed for 4 to 5 hour races. Who is right? This is a great question. A lot of people say that, number one, you need to replicate the race, kind of like what he's talking about there, or nothing replaces like those really long miles that you have.
Yeah, and there's an obvious benefit to specificity, even if it's just psychological, but largely, or often enough, it's physiological too. So I'm not trying to dismiss the value in doing something that is very much in line with the events you'll take part in, but I am here to tell you it's absolutely not necessary. There are so many ways to go about achieving aerobic adaptation. It doesn't have to be long, slow rides. There's a lot of value in those long, slow rides, but a lot of schedules don't accommodate them. And a lot of people are just mired into thinking that that's the only way I can train to race long or the only way I can perform well in long races is to do long rides in training. And that's not the case. And I know it's anecdotal, but my 2007 to 2009 seasons was when I had recently opened my indoor training studio. So that's all I did. I was indoors literally, 99% of the time. Sometimes I didn't get outdoors until it was an actual race. But when I showed up for those races, having done nothing more than 90-minute rides at the longest, it was fast and I did well, not just in my age group, but at like a regional and even a national level. And I'm not some rare special snowflake either. Everything I did, everything I did, if you do it as well, chances are you're going to have a very similar benefit. And and you don't have to go about it that way. You can go about it several different ways. The point is, these long 5 and 6 hour days are not a necessity.
Yeah.
There is benefit, but they're not necessary.
Nate, you got a big buckle at Leadville, and you did so on trainer rides that were not
2
long.
2 hour sweet spot.
There it is for what, a 9-hour day?
Yep.
Yeah, 8 hours and 52 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it.
A sub 9-hour day?
Something like that.
Yeah. I don't really know.
I've kind of like, I had this crazy idea yesterday. If I don't get sick, I kind of want to try it one day.
Okay.
But I want to do a 24-hour mountain bike race on only 2 hour sweet spot training.
Solo?
Sure.
Yeah, solo. Just to be like, so that's pretty long.
I'll hand you rice cakes.
Right? That's a pretty long thing.
You can do it. I don't question the fact of being prepared for it. You will be. That's just that's a solo 24 hours.
I know, but I want to, so again, like sometimes we can get misrepresented or people can get misrepresented. We're not saying that the long stuff, like Chad just said, it's very beneficial. I'm just saying you can do it other ways.
Yeah,
you don't have to do
so many people get terrified going into a multi-hour race when they haven't done a multi-hour ride. And I'm here to say that fear is not necessarily founded.
You have to do the distance. You have to train the distance before you can race the distance.
That's the common thought.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily straight across the board. I've plenty of people. Even Keegan's a good example of this. He didn't do before Oz Trails off road. He didn't do any sort of training that was long endurance rides at all. He was training for XCO 90-minute World Cups, right? And then he won Oz Trails off road. And
how long was that race?
That was, I think, 4 hours, 3 hours. So, and that was a long, consistent, hard effort, and he was strong at the end. So, even when you specialize at the very specific end like that, where he was basically just focusing at that point, he was just focusing on VO2 work, still had benefits.
I posted this in the forum. I'm not sure if I mentioned it last week or not, but there's the ability too of like, I can ride at a higher percentage of FTP aerobically for a long time, or I can raise my FTP and ride at a lower percentage of it, but at a higher wattage than if I didn't raise my FTP.
Exactly.
So that's kind of some of the part that people miss is if I raise my FTP 20, 30 watts and raced at that same wattage, it's actually going to be easier for me than if I would have been not raising my FTP, but been really good at riding at a higher percentage of that for a long time.
Yep.
And then once you depending, yeah. And then once you get to be, there's less room for ceiling. Like Keegan's level, he's probably not going to raise his FTP
a whole lot.
Yep.
Yeah. It's going to be small gains every year.
So if he was going for really, really long stuff, then he probably would want to do more long, slow, more aerobic stuff to be able to race at a higher percentage of FTP for longer.
Right.
Is that right, Chad?
Yeah, that's about right.
About right? Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Close enough.
I'm just saying you can elevate FTP or you can elevate stamina, which is just operating at a high level of your FTP. And some athletes get really good at it, maybe simply because they practice it and that's what their events are, or because that's the way their bodies are built. And when we talk about bodies being built, we're really referring to fiber composition.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, thanks everybody for submitting your questions. Remember, you can do so at TrainerRoad.com/podcast. If you want to find out more about this episode or anything we spoke about, you can go to forum.trainerroad.com to check out all the stuff we talked about with the calendar and all the things that we work on every day here at TrainerRoad. You can go to TrainerRoad.com. Please do so. Share the podcast with your friends. Enjoy, if you're in the United States, enjoy the holiday weekend. And we'll see you next week on Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific. If you're with us on the live stream, stick with us. We'll answer those questions you've submitted. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Seems like the live stream is going click, click, click.
Yeah, there were some issues. Nick and I were working through it while you guys were talking. Okay. So, yep, it's getting better now. So, okay, let's look at some of the questions people have submitted.
Someone, Sam asks, I had a question about triathlon. I've been seeing guys racing 70.3 with an empty bottle cage that they drop and swap bottles from aid stations in. Assuming I'm good with on-course Gatorade, is this a good way to race, or should I pack the bike with all expected fluids on my own?
Empty bottle cage or bottle?
It's a bottle cage, but I think what Sam's talking about is, should I do the 70.3 and load my bike up with everything I need to drink, or should I rely on aid stations?
Got it. Yeah.
I talked about it just a little bit. Another thing you can do is hit those aid stations pretty slow.
Yeah.
You can just, if you hit them slow, you can pretty much guarantee you're going to get a bottle unless they don't take the tab off. And even with that, you can go over. Especially Ironman brand races, they're the best supported races you'll ever do, probably. I totally like to use on-course nutrition if you are okay with what, it's Gatorade for Ironman. If you're okay with Gatorade, I would totally do that.
Somebody asked a question for Chad. Do you read your coaching advice during the rides?
No, I stopped doing that quite a while ago. I've said this. It's largely because I get distracted by typos. It's amazing how many typos weave their way into that stuff.
Then you should fix them.
I do, and then the quality of my ride suffers for it because the whole time I'm either taking notes or trying to remember. Did that happen at 3 minutes and 30 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever?
Somebody says, when running out of oxygen, what breathing technique do you recommend? I tend to exhale for 1 count and inhale for 2 counts. In other words, he tries to slow his inhaling down. I'm not really sure if there's any science on if controlling the rate like that or
the reduction in your breathing rate is where, like I said, what I'm reading right now is steering us that direction. And I remember back in the day, and that's prior to my day, with Graham O'Brien had a very particular type of breathing that he would employ during time trials. And I kicked it around for a while, and it was just like a full breath followed by a full exhale, followed by a half breath and a half exhale, a quarter breath and a quarter exhale, repeat. And it was interesting, and it actually kind of worked, but I think it worked as much in that it kept me focused and it kept me calm as anything else. But there might be something to that whole carbon dioxide sensitivity.
Do you have one?
Yeah. Joseph asks, basically he would like a training plan that's maybe geared for people trying to exercise rather than train. So we've talked about a low volume plan or rebranding plans, because really it's not really low volume. I think high should be called ultra high or something. It is pretty high. And we have talked about that, and I think Chad's going to start working on that after he's doing a special project for us.
So
I think stay tuned. No guarantee about when that will get done, because it's actually a big undertaking to do that for all levels.
Totally. Yeah. If you do want to cherry pick workouts or anything else like that, though, if you just want to check them out, you can always filter by intensity in the app, and you can filter by duration.
What he did is he just went to his wife started Sweet Spot, and then he just changed them all to 30-minute versions.
I was just going to say that. Just look at Sweet Spot base 1 and 2 and trim them down to the 30 and 45-minute versions.
Yep.
Jonathan asks, not me, thanks for creating such a great product when completing a threshold workout, and I'm struggling to keep the cadence at 80 or above 85 RPM on the last 2 intervals. He says, are you avoiding any gains by doing that? And I assume that he means if your cadence is struggling or dropping down like that, and you're not able to maintain that, if you're avoiding any of the gains.
Not likely. No, I wouldn't concern myself too much with that. I mean, if you're always grinding along at 75 RPM, over time, I'd like to see that come up for a lot of obvious reasons. But if as the workout wanes or as the workout rolls forward, you start to fade a bit and that fatigue results in a lower cadence, it's not like all the adaptations that we're pursuing with 85 to 95 RPM go away.
Right. Exactly.
Especially not at that effort level. We're not talking about grinding out 120% efforts at 50 RPM here. This is a pretty subtle difference.
In most cases, I don't know if you're just doing very flat triathlons where you can control the cadence very, specifically. But I'd recommend you getting familiar with stuff below 85 RPM.
It's not the worst thing. And do look at it in terms of your nutrition too, because if you're starting, firing on all cylinders for those first couple of intervals and then the last couple of intervals are consistently lower in quality, then it might be due to just your level of fitness, and endurance. It might also be due to your level of fuel or your methods of fueling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would make sense.
I can't wait. Like whenever I get sick, I get so motivated to come back training, and then once we do this podcast and we talk about all this stuff, I'm like,
you just want to get.
I just want to train so bad.
And when somebody steals your KOM, it just makes you want to get out there.
that actually that doesn't motivate me too much because I don't have any. Like, I mean, it's not.
It's close. You can get it, Nate.
Okay.
You can get it back, and you can do it solo.
Mario
dangle
says,
that carrot out there for them again.
Exactly right.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Thank you. PR'd on 70.3 and 140.6. So a half and 2 fulls this year, all on TrainerRoad plans.
Nice.
That's a wrap this year. You guys are awesome.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Let's see. Somebody says, I'm 48 years old. What does it indicate if time spent in my heart rate zone is more than time spent in my power zone, i.e. 1 hour in threshold heart rate for only 30 minutes combined in threshold? I believe I'm misreading this one, but I think that the question that he's saying here is that, first of all, hinting perhaps with the age being the issue. I'm 48. What does it indicate if the time spent in my heart rate zone is more than time spent in my power zones? Once again, I hope that we talked about heart rate climbing, but on some days you may see heart rate not being where it usually is for that power output as well. And it may, dip out of that zone or spend more time in different spots. The two don't correlate perfectly across the scale. They are going to change based on many different factors. So if you do see that, just know that it's not abnormal. So.
David asks, this is for you, Chad, when you take 10 days off the bike entirely for a trip with no riding, how long does it usually take to get back to your prior 5, 20, and 60-minute power levels? I'm finding about 4 to 6 weeks, but sometimes longer. Is this your experience?
No. I mean, it depends what level of fitness you carried into that 10 days. First off, you're a beginner. It's going to be very different than a seasoned veteran. So speaking from the perspective of someone who has a decent amount of training in their legs, a couple of years, a couple weeks, really. I mean, it's not 10 days off shouldn't derail you that far. It simply shouldn't. If it's taking you 6 weeks to get back, I got to question how much fitness you carried into it and what you're doing afterwards that makes it such a slow return.
Yeah, I find with that much time off, maybe in the plan, going back 1 to maybe 2 progression levels if it was a stressful trip. But then, so maybe that means maybe 1 to 2 weeks back. You could probably finish the same previous week's workouts, but they're just really hard.
Yeah.
But I don't see any harm in, or actually I would recommend stepping back at least a week, maybe 2 in the plan. But
easy to do now on the calendar.
Super easy. Another one, during your training sessions, meaning the indoor sessions, what would you guys recommend to drink? Remember that chances are you're going to be sweating a good amount. If you don't have a good fan, you'll be sweating even more. You should fuel, in my mind, your indoor sessions just as you would fuel your outdoor sessions. Yeah. So it's a good idea to take an electrolyte mix and good idea to take on fuel, especially like you said with those 2-hour sweet spot efforts.
For sure, 2 hours. I think of it too as we talked about this before, but as a bit of recovery to get more I'm thinking about the next workout and the next workout and the next workout. And especially I'm going to race the next or ride the next day. Even with something aerobic, I take in fuel just to increase my recovery rate so I'm not as depleted for the next ride. We raised this table to make us at this look the sign Lord. And Chad, you definitely need to sit on something. I'm just looking at this live stream.
I
You
know.
look like a much.
It got much taller.
I got a lot taller. And Jonathan is actually sitting on
a pillow.
Yeah, on a pillow. So
he's got a booster seat.
And I'm just normal. This is how tables should be.
Yeah.
But we'll get you a phone book next time. A boost. Yeah, I have boosters for my kids.
Might be able to drop it down a bit.
Trim this down a bit.
Yeah, we can probably trim it
down.
Then
it will be too low for me.
That's true. So we'll just give you a booster seat then.
Okay.
So another question. This is from a 16-year-old athlete. Says, I'm a junior, age 16, going on 17. Is 550 annual hours too much or too little for me? I've been training seriously with periodization for the past 2 years. My main goal is state, crit, and track state. So that's about 10 hours a week that they're putting in. Is if you're 16 going on 17, I don't think that's necessarily out of the realm of like a
reasonably safe training load. I mean, obviously the composition of the training is going to factor into that usually. So if we're talking 10 hours a week of VO2 max and over-unders and tough depleting stuff, it's probably too much. But if half of those hours, maybe there's a 4 or 5 hour ride woven in there at aerobic endurance level, I think it's a very safe.
And it really depends on what you've been doing leading up to that too. Like, if you haven't been doing much training at all, then you jump into
if you're new
like
to training and you're doing 10 hours a week straight out of the gates, it's probably, but even then, who knows? It depends on, what level of athlete, what type of athlete you are.
Yeah. The point of me, hitting on that last point is if you're hearing this and you're 16 going on 17, don't think that you need to be doing exactly that. Right.
Yeah.
It sounds reasonably safe though. 10 hours a week.
Listen to your body. If we were to say, is 40 hours a week too much? We'd be like, yes.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly.
Daryl asks, Nate, are there pictures of your Leadville buckle?